One of my favorite villain origin stories ever put to screen cost nothing to film. It didn't have a stunt coordinator, it didn't have a prosthetics budget, it had no second unit. It just had 22 minutes of drawings, and it made a generation of children genuinely grieve for a man that they'd never met over a woman that they have never seen alive. The episode Heart of Ice shouldn't work, at least not on paper. The premise is operatic to the point of parody. A scientist watches his dying wife frozen in a cryogenic tank, while his corporate overlord pulls the plug on the experiment. He becomes a cold blooded villain. That's not a story, that's a soap opera logline with ice puns waiting at the end of it. And we know it can fail because we've seen it fail on a budget of $125 million with Arnold Schwarzenegger in the suit, delivering lines like ice to meet you with the energy of a man who genuinely does not understand that the movie was bad. The premise didn't change between 1992 and 1997. The character didn't change. What changed was the medium, and the medium is doing most of the work. Paul Dini wrote this episode reportedly over a single weekend for a character the writing staff considered throwing away. What he understood that Schumacher never figured out with nine figures is that Mr. Freeze doesn't need to perform grief, he needs to contain it. That image works because animation doesn't apologize for its own artificiality. The blue palette, the stillness of his face, the mechanical flatness of his voice. These aren't limitations the medium is compensating for. They are the core argument. Freeze's face doesn't move because Freeze has sealed himself off from everything that would require it to move. The design is the psychology. You can't do that in live action without it reading as bad acting or prosthetics, because photorealism carries an implicit contract. If a human face is on screen, it should look like it's feeling something. Break that contract, and the viewers start diagnosing the production instead of inhabiting the story. Animation has no such contract. The artificiality is declared up front, and that declaration is what gives the audience permission to do the emotional work themselves. Watch the scene where Freeze breaks into GothCorp and Boyle, the executive who condemned Nora, confronts him. He doesn't say, I hate you. He doesn't monologue about what was taken from him. He states a fact, the way you read a lab result. And it lands like a gut punch because the restraint is total. There's nothing underneath it performing what he actually feels. The episode earns that ambiguity and leaves it sitting there. Dini structures everything around withheld information. We don't know why Freeze is doing this until the midpoint. We don't know who Nora is until Batman investigates and finds the recorded journal entries. Freeze's own documentation of losing her played back without comment while Batman watches in silence. Dini doesn't explain the tragedy, he presents it through Freeze's own words in the past tense, spoken by a man who no longer sounds like the person who recorded them. The horror isn't what happened to Nora, it's the distance between the voice on that recording and the thing in the armor. Live action cannot do this scene, not because live action is inferior, but because a live actor sitting in front of a camera is already generating meaning through presence, breath, micro expressions. The medium is already emotional before anyone says anything. You have to work against that to achieve the emptiness that Freeze requires. And working against the medium is where performances go wrong. Actors want to fill silences. Directors want to cut away. Editors find the reaction shot. The whole machinery of live action filmmaking is designed to make human interaction feel normal, and Freeze is explicitly not that. Animation earns the silence because silence is the default state. Nothing moves unless someone decides it should. When Freeze is still, it's not about absence, it's about intention. But the episode ends with Freeze in his cell, watching a snow globe. The camera just sits with it. That's not writing a villain, that is writing a person. The argument this series is building toward is simple. Animation can do things other mediums cannot, not because it's better, but because it operates by different rules. The rules that make live action powerful, presence, physicality, the weight of a human face, are the same rules that would have destroyed Heart of Ice. Freeze's tragedy lives in the gap between what he was and what he's become. Animation holds that gap open while everything else tries to close it. Now, Heart of Ice won the Emmy for outstanding writing in a children's program in 1993 for a supervillain cartoon about grief. Hollywood has spent 30 years not learning a single thing from that.